everyone. Welcome back to my channel. I am Nicole Frolick of Inflexible Me, and today we're going to be talking about why parasitic entities want you to forget your soul. And this information is really interesting. We're going to go into a much deeper understanding of how this is working and how we're manipulated to keep our energy low so that we become human batteries for these parasitic entities and remain basically slaves to the lower consciousness levels. So understanding what our soul purpose is, why we actually incarnated here on earth, is so that our soul could go through the experiences and lessons that we needed to realign us with the natural laws of the universe, the multiverse, bringing us back to alignment and unifying with source energy, God source energy. And we are guided through the law of one. The law of one is a great set of laws that give us guidance on how to realign ourselves with the laws of nature. And we realize that as we become of service to others, aligning and understanding that if we want to see more love in the world, we have to become more love. These are all great guidances that are provided through the law of one to help bring us back into alignment with the universal laws and unifying us with source energy, God source energy. Now, it's important to understand that as we do this, our quality of life increases dramatically. It becomes more happy, more joyful, there's more love. We experience a much higher quality of life the more we unify with God's source energy, which means the more that we step away from source energy, the more we kind of disengage with the laws of the universe, we experience a much lower quality of life. Now, to bring energy down into a scientific level, our production of energy happens when our mitochondria in our cells produce and store ATP molecules. And so we're taught through science that when we eat our food, those nutrients get converted through the mitochondria into ATP molecules, which we then use for energy. What actually happens, though, on a much more spiritual level, is that as we connect with our higher self, as we expand our consciousness and bring more light into our physical body, we actually increase the light held within the ATP molecules, which increases the function of the mitochondria, improving the overall health of our body. So as you'll notice that as you start to align yourself with these laws of nature, that your health improves. As I said before, our quality of life improves. And part of that quality of life is definitely our physical health. Now, as you move away from these laws of nature, what happens is that the less light that is held within these ATP molecules is that the mitochondria starts to break down and starts to lead to dysfunction, and the cells start to get sick and die off. And that's where we start to see disease. Now, what's also really cool is that this is from an individual perspective that I've been discussing, but from a collective perspective, when you have groups of people in the same location working to connect with their higher self, working to align and unify with God's source energy, that the potential of energy in that area is heightened, and it leads to the group as a whole being led to expand their consciousness more. It leads to more health and a higher quality of life within that location. So it's almost like everyone's feeding each other and boosting that whole location. Well, the same works for if the location, if in any given location, if you have a group of people, a community of people who are not connected to their higher self, don't even realize that they have a spiritual body, don't even realize that they can have this connection or even want to make this connection because they don't even know it exists. This is what can lead to a lower potential of consciousness, leading to less individual development, less access to intelligent information that can come in through our cellular knowing, when it's our higher self. And this leads people to enter into a survival mode rate. And as we know, survival mode is all about fear. And this leads people into a greater potential of energy to be harvested by these parasitic entities. So understanding from an energetic level, just into the scientific level too, in our actual physical cells, that this is what these parasitic entities want. They want large groups of people in a specific location to have a very low level of consciousness and have no idea that they can have this spiritual connection. They don't even want them to be aware that they have a spiritual body. And when we don't have an awareness of our spiritual body, we don't even know that we can have this connection. And when you don't even know that you have this connection or that you have a spiritual body, you are now so susceptible to being taken advantage of on that energy level. And you become easily manipulated for these negative entities to take advantage of and harvest your lower vibrational energy for their own needs. Now, I want to talk about stations of identity, because we mentioned with the mitochondria in our cells, we have to understand that in our physical cells, every cell within our body, our higher self is enmeshed. Our consciousness is enmeshed into the cells, and it comes through what is called stations of identity. Now, stations of identity are areas within our body, within our physical cells, that hold the entire human consciousness blueprint, like the original human consciousness blueprint, also the light body of ourselves, and our own soul's consciousness. So these stations of identity become active and are expressed more the more we line up with our spiritual development, the more we start to tune into our higher self, the more that we align ourselves with the actual natural laws of the universe, leading us back to unification with God's source. When these are suppressed, it actually starts to break down the mitochondria. It leads to breakdown of the mitochondria, which leads to less energy, which leads to disease, the death of certain cells, and that creates disease on our physical level, which also, again, lowers our quality of life and creates the perfect scenario for these parasitic entities to feed off of our energy. Now, it's important to know that when these stations of identity are suppressed, what happens is we're taken further and further away from our consciousness, and we're brought into more unconsciousness. And when this happens, our soul begins to fragment. So this unawareness of our soul and our spiritual bodies takes us into more violent behaviors, more anti-human behaviors, so taking us away from the natural laws. And this lower consciousness level keeps perpetuating this vicious cycle of more violence, more divisive human behaviors, taking us completely away from unification. So really taking us away from the law of one principles and guidelines that are here for us to help bring us back to source energy. And so soul fragmentation also provides a higher potential of energy for these parasitic entities. So the more fragmented your soul becomes, the more potential of energy these parasitic entities can feed off of. So they want that to happen. They want your soul to be fragmented because it just gives them more harvestable energy. So I really wanted to go through this with everyone so they understand the deeper levels of how our consciousness, the collective consciousness, how we live our lives is so tied into how these parasitic entities are manipulating us to keep us in lower levels of consciousness, taking us away from the alignment to the natural laws so that we become unified back to source, which is our whole purpose here on life. That's why we're incarnated here, so we go through these lessons. So it's important to remember to be very aware of our soul lessons and what we're learning, and to do the growth, to do the work that we're needed to do, and to align our life and how we live our life in much more accordance with the law of one, so that we can not just live our life that way, but notice that our quality of life is going to definitely improve. And when we start to see this and we start to really learn it on that cellular level, when our consciousness is really starting to root into our cellular body here, we learn things much more and we're able to live them out. And when you're able to live them out, people can witness it. You become the model for that. And one of our duties here on earth is that as we learn our lessons, we are here to teach others, to help them come more into their consciousness, relate more to their spiritual bodies, understand that they have a spiritual body, so that they can begin to leave behind the negative manipulation of these lower vibrational levels of consciousness, and where the manipulation happens from these negative and parasitic entities, so that we can shift the whole collective human consciousness, the original blueprint of human consciousness, back into alignment with source energy. So very, very important. So I wanted to kind of lay that out there because it's really cool information for us to really kind of take our knowledge of what we know and bring it down to a deeper level, really understand that our physical body does house our consciousness in its cells, and how when we start to come out of our awareness and move into more unconscious lifestyles and ways of living, that we're literally preventing that light from coming into our ATP molecules, allowing the light body to really take form into our physical being, which then creates disease. And then we create soul fragmentation, and we do not want soul fragmentation, because that is exactly what these parasitic entities want. If you're receiving attacks from negative entities, parasitic entities, and you're really not sure how to deal with it, I do have some courses in my academy. That one of them is for protection, and it's a 2-hour webinar. So it gives you all these great techniques that you can apply into your life right now, that's going to start to clear that out, rebuild your aura, close off any holes that may have been created that the negative entities are using to access your energy field, and create a much stronger protective energy field around you. So also remember, everything that we do is helping us align more and more with the law of one. So take that information and see how you can implement it into your life, so that you can increase the quality of your life and bring more joy and happiness into you, because it really does. We don't realize it sometimes when we coming out of ego and we've been living more from a place of service of self only, and how do we just like, we're more concerned with what do I get out of it versus how does the whole get out, what does the whole get out of it? And we don't realize that we actually feel so much better. We feel so much better, and so much more joy comes into our life when we do work from this service to others.